We are following breaking news as it relates to Middle East conflict. Take a look. You can see Israel Defense Forces very busy this Monday morning. They put this out on X a few hours ago. They say a UAV, that's a unmanned aerial vehicle. That's what that stands for. They say that was likely launched from Yemen, hit a home in the area. They go on to say, as of now, no injuries were reported. No sirens were sounded. The incident is under review, end quote. All of this happening while the Associated Press is reporting this Monday that Israel's foreign minister says it struck suspected chemical weapons sites and long-range rockets in Syria in order to prevent them from falling into the hands of hostile actors. A lot to dissect this morning. We want to bring in Independent Women's Forum Senior Fellow Dr. Qanta Ahmed into the conversation. Dr. Qanta, always a pleasure to have you on the show. Good morning.
Pleasure. Good morning.
So I know you've had a very busy few weeks. I know you literally just got back from the Middle East right before this interview. Talk about your trip. You were in Lebanon, correct?
No, I was in Israel. I was looking at the front between Israel and Hezbollah in the very northernmost region. And it is astonishing to see the proximity of the Hezbollah infrastructure. I was standing in Israel, 300 meters away from the Hezbollah front, which, by the way, was constructed in full view of United Nations interim forces. So looking at the intimacy with which the belligerence of Hezbollah is encroaching on Israel, and of course, kept Israel under fire for more than a year with tens of thousands of missiles, you start to see how complicated these relationships really are and how close all of these borders and all of these enemies are to the sovereign Jewish state. 6 weeks ago, I was also on the border of Israel and Syria at a special place known as Qanta, which is a lookout point. And it was very clear to me at that time that the contracting footprint of Iran, which has really been decimated, seeing the destruction of its proxies, Hezbollah and Hamas, achieved by Israel, was leaving a vacuum. The time that I was there 6 weeks ago on the border of Israel and Syria, one could still see and know that Russian patrol troops were very nearby, just behind the hill from the lookout point where I was. Now we see a Syria that apparently has fallen to a rebel leader who's being rebranded as some kind of leader for the nation, though he was previously a member of Jamaat al-Nusra, which was previously an offshoot of al-Qaeda, and in my opinion is just as much of a radical Islamist as any of the groups in this region.
Thank you so much for that detailed analysis there, Dr. Qanta. So a lot to dissect, because I told you when we were in break, it seems like every time we speak, a new conflict has come about. I know when we were further at first looking at the very latest in Yemen, we were looking at the Houthi rebels. A lot of questions this morning about that organization and how that relates or does not relate to the Assad regime. Could you provide that perspective, please?
So, Jeane, I think the most important thing you've said is that each time we've met, this conflict is expanding and radiating outwards. It was triggered by October 7th Hamas assault on Israel. That led to a war, a defensive war of Israel against Hamas. And then that spiraled outwards because Hezbollah got involved, and that led to a front in Lebanon. Now we're seeing a front in Syria. Mentioning the Houthis, these are a Shia offshoot, a Zaidi Shia offshoot. They are very strongly aligned in allegiance with Iran. They've been financed by Iran. They control critical areas in the south of Yemen that strangle and bottleneck the Red Sea. And so the entire Red Sea has been at the mercy of their actions. And as you can see, they have drone capabilities. The international community was fine to cope with piracy in the Red Sea and join and make a coalition and fight piracy, but they've been absolutely inept at trying to control and push back these terrorists, they're a designated terrorist group, from disrupting the Red Sea. The first order of business for President Trump when he comes into inauguration is to first reopen the Red Sea. It's the world's most vital arterial maritime corridor. So that has to be more than just posturing with our warships, that group has to be defanged. Number one, financing from Iran has to stop, but actually bombing their installations and removing them from the arena so that they can not disrupt the rest of the region. I'm not aware of links between the Houthis and Syria, but I'm not deeply expert on that, so I could be mistaken. The situation in Syria leaves everybody in the region on edge, including Iraq, which is, of course, governed by a federal Iraq in Baghdad, but has been proxified by Iran for decades in the vacuum the United States left. So there is a very powerful Iranian militia army that controls every checkpoint in federal Iraq. Only the northern Kurdish Iraqi region is autonomous. And Turkey absolutely anticipated this. Many of the Western commentators are shocked at the developments in Syria, but it was very obvious 6 weeks ago, Turkey was already calculating the vacuum left by a retreating Iranian footprint, and they wanted to secure that northeast corridor. That's where they will confront Kurds that control the Kurdish area of Syria, but also the northeast corridor is the breadbasket of Syria. It's also where the oil assets are. It's very strategic. And Turkey is planning to relocate the 3.5 million refugees it took from Syria back there. Many people are wanting to go back to their own country and already crossing the border in there. It's yet to be seen. And my fear is, as Libya collapsed, as Saddam Hussein collapsed, are we going to get into another insoluble sectarian war, which will attract foreign fighters? And that's my fear. And that's why you see Israel is moving to secure its defensive positions in exactly those arenas in the Golan Heights that I was visiting. And Assad had astonishing chemical warfare. Let's not forget, he is the monster of our age. Barrel bombing his civilians, chemical warfare on his civilians. There are countless tens of thousands of Syrians in underground prisons. His record on torture, including torturing people when they were alive, organ harvesting people when they were alive, is well documented. So we just don't know how this is going to unfold.
A lot of unanswered questions this Monday morning, Dr. Qanta. And one thing that you said that stood out for many of the viewers is about the fear and the people fleeing. I found this shot that I routed in so we could both look at this together and dissect it. You literally see droves of people standing there at that security clearance and at that border crossing. The question is, where can you flee when there's so much conflict there in the Middle East? If we look back at the conflict with Hezbollah that we spoke on at the onset of this interview, we do know that Israeli Defense Forces told many people to evacuate before they began their ground incursions. But the question is there even a safe place? As we know, the conflict out in Gaza continues, the conflict with Lebanon, and then now we are seeing with Syria.
So let's be very precise on this. The conflict with Hezbollah, Israel is with Hezbollah. It's not with the Lebanese people. It is very different. The Lebanese people, even though they were deeply distressed, some civilian lives have been lost, they were free to escape into the rest of their nation. They were not in a closed enclave. In Syria, it's not clear where, if further conflict is going to be. This self-appointed leader, al-Jolani, now calling himself President Ahmed of Syria, is stating that it'll be a peaceful transfer, but we don't know. And also, the collapse of Syria is even more devastating for Lebanon, because Lebanon, which already had a very fragile economy, corrupted by the black market, by terror financing, by financing with the drug industry that would come from Syria, that has almost nothing to hold on to now. And Syria is now in this state of flux. So it's quite likely that we're going to see population influxes. Getting back to Israel, there are still 143,000 Israelis internally displaced in Israel. When I stood with the commander at Misgav Am, a location right on the Lebanese border, I can see that the Shiite villages that were full of Hezbollah infrastructure absolutely surround the tiny Israeli valley. So any chance Hezbollah can regroup and conflict can begin again. And while there has been tremendous effort to decimate Hamas leadership, Hezbollah leadership, the infrastructures on both places, and that's really been achieved, I would not count Iran out. Iran is an extraordinarily resilient nation, or rather, the Iranian regime. They were decimated in a 10-year war with Iraq, known as Gulf War One, and they had over 1 million lives lost. And they came back to create this international proxy arena, which has disrupted the wider Middle East. So nothing is certain at the moment. I think Israel is taking very sensible defensive measures in its northern borders to protect against any fallout. I do think there are going to be many Syrians that are living in Turkey that are going to be thrilled to get back into Syrian territory. What they find there and how they will be governed is yet to see. And many, and in fact, the first instinct I had is this very much reminds me of the fall of Kabul and how the Taliban achieved a domination over the country in a few days. And all kinds of nice speeches were made about how it would be a new Afghanistan and women and girls would not be persecuted and minorities would not be persecuted. And we are here today with over 40 million Afghans captive to one of the most brutal regimes in the world. So I am holding a judgment and very skeptical at the moment.
Dr. Qanta Ahmed, thank you so much for that thorough dissection of the conflict, also your perspective and analysis. Always a pleasure having you on the show. I hope you enjoy the rest of your day.
Absolutely, pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you.